be to the Lord Jesus Christ for another day, another episode, and another chance to speak. I pray that the words can reach you, and I pray that you can go forward knowing that He is with you each and every step that you take. With that being said, let us begin. What follows must be understood with care, because the age in which we live rewards distortion more than truth. Let it be known I do not reject self government. I reject its counterfeit. Across this nation, and increasingly across the Western world, people sense that what is called democracy no longer reflects their consent, their will, or their interest. Power has migrated upward and outward, away from families and communities, and into technocratic systems, corporate lobbies, and unaccountable networks that persist regardless of elections. This is not the failure of the people. It is the failure of a captured governing structure. In response, I do not call for chaos, mob rule, or the abandonment of law and order. I call for the restoration of legitimate authority, authority strong enough to act, yet restrained enough to remain accountable. A central executive authority is necessary not as an absolute ruler, but as a steward tasked with execution rather than domination, one who bears final responsibility without possessing final sovereignty. Power must be unified in responsibility, but limited in its scope. Congress, the courts, and our representative institutions are not ceremonial relics from a forgotten age. They are living instruments of restraint, deliberation, and accountability. They exist to temper power, challenge excess, and ensure that no office, however strong, escapes the discipline of law or the judgment of the people. The leader does not reign above the nation, nor dissolve into it. He governs on behalf of the people as a steward rather than a sovereign, always removable, always answerable, always bound by the same law that binds those he serves. Authority flows upward from the people and downward through the law, never outward into permanence or privilege. This is not tyranny, nor is it chaos. This is order with limits, strength constrained by responsibility, and power restrained by a purpose. I reject the silent coup of corporations, lobbyists, and technocratic elites, not by abolishing enterprise or innovation, but by restoring their proper place. Markets are tools, not masters, and technology is an instrument, not an arbiter. Institutions exist to serve the people in the nation, not to substitute themselves for it. Economic power is not sovereign. It is and always will be subordinate. Or no corporation, no algorithm, no artificial system, however efficient or profitable, may ever outrank the dignity of a human being or the authority of a self governing people. When systems cease to serve the common good, they forfeit their legitimacy. This is the line I draw: human dignity above profit, law above power, the people above any machinery that would rule them without consent. Therefore, I affirm a nationalist doctrine not rooted in blood, race, or exclusion, but in a shared civic duty, a shared inheritance, and a moral responsibility. It is a nationalism anchored in stewardship, paired deliberately with subsidiary and genuine self governance. A nation is strongest when power is concentrated in purpose, not hoarded in distance, and when authority rests as close to the people as possible. We must also make it clear that identity is not something to be flattened or erased. It is layered, ordered, and lived from regions, states, and local communities must retain real authority over their affairs, their culture, economies, and future, while remaining bound together by constitutional framework that secures stability, continuity, opportunity, and peace. Unity does not require uniformity. It requires alignment under law. I reject the modern lie that opportunity must be pursued through exile. Mass migration, driven by desperation, is not a moral triumph. It is an indictment of failed systems and hollow leadership. For a just civilization does not treat displacement as policy or suffering as proof of progress. A righteous order does not force people to abandon their homes, heritage, or communities simply to survive. It establishes lawful order, security, and economic dignity where the people live, so that flourishing is possible without flight, and hope is possible that does not require escape. So I do not oppose technology. I oppose dehumanization. For artificial intelligence, surveillance architectures, and technocratic governance increasingly reduce human beings to data points, productivity metrics, or variables to be managed rather than persons to be served. This inversion is civilizationally destructive. When efficiency replaces conscience of mankind and systems replace moral judgment, humanity is diminished. And civilization must be reclaimed as a human endeavor, one that is governed by moral limits, one that is ordered by truth, and one that is anchored in the inviolable dignity of the person. Technology must remain a servant and never a master. For systems must answer to conscience, and that no mechanism, however advanced, may ever outrank the human soul. And above all, I reject any so called New World Order that governs through secrecy rather than consent of the people, and centralization, unjust and unruly, rather than accountable. dependency rather than dignity, and spiritual emptiness rather than God's given truth. Such systems promise us stability, but deliver us only bondage and chains, deliver us to full submission. They concentrate power upward while hollowing out the rest of nations below. What I affirm instead is ordered liberty, public authority grounded in law, restrained by consent, informed by faith, and exercised with responsibility. Where power exists to serve the people and preserve the moral conditions necessary for freedom, not to replace them or rule them from a distance. No earthly leader is ultimate, and no office is final. All human authority is subordinate, answerable not only to the will of the people, but to a higher moral order that precedes the state and judges it. Jesus Christ alone is sovereign, and it is his kingship that restrains human power. It humbles rulers and forbids the idolatry of government, ideology of empire. When God is removed from the hierarchy of authority, the state inevitably seeks to occupy his place. This vision does not begin with conquest or coercion abroad. It begins with restoration here at the home of law, trust, moral clarity, and of self-government. And from that foundation, cooperation may grow outward, not by force, but by communion, not by the goal of domination, but by law, shared interests, commerce, and mutual respect. This is not withdrawal from the world. It is the reordering of it, beginning with the discipline to govern ourselves rightly. Which leads me to declare to you today, my fellow citizens and friends across this hemisphere, we stand at the hinge of history, a moment when delayed decisions demand resolution, and a moment when the cost of restraint must be weighed against the cost of disorder. In recent days, the United States has acted decisively to enforce long-standing indictments against the architects of regimes that have poisoned their own citizens, stripped bare the dignity and rights of brothers and sisters, of millions alike. Trafficked humans, smuggled drugs to other South American nations, and paid no price for it. But that ended a few days ago. We will no longer let narco states rule and determine what can and cannot be achieved in this continent. No longer will the people have to cower in fear to cartels or to any ill work who ploys on the insatiable carnal desires of man and uses them to poison himself to death. Needless to say, those responsible for flooding our streets with fentanyl and cocaine and other illicit drugs, for weaponizing corruption, and for partnering with transnational criminal networks. Will soon face the judgment of citizens ready to take back what is theirs. Shall they face a council governed by law rather than hiding behind the shelter of impunity? Let it be known that this was not an act of aggression. It was an act of accountability. Justice delayed becomes justice denied, not only to Americans who have buried children lost to narcotics, but to entire regions destabilized by regimes that profit from chaos while hiding behind the language of sovereignty. And this goes for other nations as well. Law cannot remain credible if it stops at borders, while criminal enterprises ignore them entirely. Predictably, voices have risen in protest. From foreign capitals that long tolerated, excused, or quietly benefited from this tyranny. The same leaders who looked away while a nation collapsed now object to the resolve required to confront it. Those quickest to lecture that the United States on human rights and international law recoil when America defends its people, its borders, and its communities from the spillover of failed states and criminal governance. So let us be clear. Sovereignty is not a shield for criminal enterprise. It is a responsibility. And when a regime, when a nation forfeits that responsibility, when it aligns with traffickers, terrorists, and cartels, it forfeits the moral claim to protection from consequence. Enough is enough. This republic will not apologize for enforcing the law, nor will it be shamed into paralysis while poison crosses our borders and violence metastasizes under the cover of diplomacy. Strength exercised in defense of justice is not imperialism. It is not a violation of the common good. Rather, it is the necessary condition for sustainable peace. America has never claimed perfection, nor should it. Across our history, we have at times aligned with flawed regimes, misjudged local realities, or intervened where prudence might have counseled restraint. These failures deserve honesty, not denial, but they must be weighed against a full record, not caricatured into cynicism. Measured against every other global power in modern history, the United States has been the most generous, the most diplomatic, and the most restrained in the exercise of power. We rebuilt nations that once sought our destruction. We fed the populations beyond our borders. We dismantled tyrannies, secured trade routes, stabilized currencies, and extended opportunity where others extracted wealth and left ruin behind. We are vilified precisely because we are relied upon, called upon to underwrite stability, reinforce alliances, and resolve crisis. We did not create. America is then scolded for the cost, complexity, and imperfection of leadership. Responsibility has become our burden and our reproach. Europe, after years of lax leadership that allowed uncontrolled migration to strain social cohesion, overwhelm public services, and expose citizens to preventable danger, now protests American resolve while hesitating to meet its own defense obligations. The same governments that outsourced their security now bristle at the discipline required to preserve it. Across South America, governments riddled with cartel influence, corruption, poverty, and violence increasingly drift toward adversarial powers while speaking to the United States with entitlement rather than partnership. They demand endless aid without offering stability, security, or opportunity for their own people. They export desperation northward, even as they condemn our enforcement of our laws against illegal entry, trafficking, and organized crime, expecting America to remain open while guarding their own borders with force. By no means is this partnership. This is a dependency masquerading as diplomacy. In distant theaters, our commitments have at times hardened into liabilities. Unconditional support for certain allies has drawn us into prolonged conflicts that drain resources, fracture public trust, and distract from domestic renewal and hemispheric priorities. When alliances lose moral clarity and strategic balance, they erode sympathy abroad and unity at home. For prudence now demands reassessment, and commitments must be reciprocated. Alliances must serve mutual interests, shared responsibilities, and defined objectives, not endless obligation borne by one nation alone. American strength must once again be exercised with concernment and morality, clarity and restraint. Exercise our authority, exemplifying that we are strong enough to lead, we are wise enough to say no, and we are disciplined enough to place national renewal before perpetual entanglement. Nearly 2 centuries ago, America declared that the Western Hemisphere was no longer open to foreign conquest or imperial ambition. That principle was not born of arrogance, but one of necessity. A line drawn to protect the sovereignty of nations still finding their footing in a dangerous world. Tonight, we reaffirm that declaration for a new age. The Americas are not only closed to foreign domination, they are closed to lawlessness spawned from within, to narco states, criminal regimes, and shadowy powers that export death, corruption, and desperation across borders while hiding behind the language of sovereignty. Protection alone is no longer sufficient. The pressure bearing down upon this hemisphere, lawlessness that ignores borders, desperation that drives millions from their homes, and foreign powers eager to exploit division and extract resources, demand more than reaction. They demand shared resolve, a common covenant, and responsibility proportionate to both our power and our providence. For the time has come for the nations of the Western Hemisphere to claim a greater destiny. Not an empire of conquest or coercion, but a shared order of liberty. An order rooted in consent, restrained by constitutional law, and consecrated to the inherent dignity of every human soul, from the Arctic to Cape Horn. This would not erase nations, cultures, or inheritance itself. It would preserve them, each people retaining its language, traditions, and sovereignty, yet united in strength, stability, and moral clarity that no nation could secure alone. This is our duty. This by no means is arrogance. It is the recognition, rather, that the self evident truths of human equality and unalienable rights do not end at borders drawn by history or convenience. They are the birthplace of every person in this hemisphere, and it is our obligation as stewards of power and beneficiaries of liberty to secure them together. The road before us will not be an easy one. Old suspicions and counsel will delay. Habit will urge caution. Yet history is unambiguous on this point. Great enterprises are never born of comfort. They require risk, resolve, and moral confidence. And the greatest danger has always been inaction while the world shifts beneath our feet. Let us begin then, not with proclamation, but with conversation, not with demands, but with an invitation. Let us build deliberately and lawfully under our Lord Jesus Christ, indivisible in purpose, committed to liberty and justice for all. We are heirs to a revolution that ignited the modern world. We are guardians of a blessed continent. We are bearers of a faith that commands the strong to serve the weak, the free to defend the oppressed, and authority to answer to truth rather than to appetite. That is the America I know. That is the hemisphere we are capable of becoming. In service to the United States and the peoples of the Western Hemisphere, what some would call an American empire is not the fantasy of ambition, but it is the burden of responsibility, one that is exercised only through moral clarity and is also restrained by a constitutional order, which is anchored in reverence for human dignity. The Western Hemisphere is not a monolith, but a living body of nations, each with its own language, culture, history, and inheritance. These distinctions are not obstacles to unity. They are its strength. Diversity ordered toward a common good does not fracture, it multiplies. Voluntary constitutional unification, freely chosen and lawfully bounded, can preserve these identities while elevating them all alike. It can secure peace without erasure, strength without domination, and unity without surrender. The Monroe Doctrine once declared that the Western Hemisphere would no longer be subject to foreign empires, that it was a doctrine of protection, one born of necessity in an age of empire and conquest. In our modern day, protection alone has become insufficient. Stability, prosperity, and freedom cannot be sustained by defense and isolation. Rather, they require a shared purpose, coordinated responsibility, communion between bodies, and a moral alignment among free peoples. Such a union would dissolve no nation into anonymity and erase no borders by force. It would establish a lawful framework in which each nation retains its identity, culture, and self governance, while participating voluntarily in a hemispheric order oriented toward security, prosperity, and liberty. Sovereignty would not be surrendered completely, but strengthened through cooperation rooted in consent. Under such an order, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness would no longer be treated as geographic privileges reserved for the fortunate, but as safeguarded principles upheld across the hemisphere. This objective is clear. The defense of the Western Hemisphere, from its coastlines, trade routes, resources, and in peoples, from exploitation, subversion, criminal governance, and lawlessness. A shared mission, a shared vision, and purpose does not dilute American strength. It fortifies it. And in doing so, it elevates the aspirations of every nation willing to uphold law, dignity, and responsibility. Critics will predictably label this vision imperial or oppressive, yet they offer no answer to the millions fleeing desperation, not disloyalty to their nation, but homelands hollowed out by corruption, cartel violence, and systemic decay. A hemispheric union does not demand exile. It extends protection without displacement, allowing people to flourish where they live rather than gamble their lives in flight. This vision preserves national identity rather than erasing it. It is a covenant of mutual defense, lawful order, and shared prosperity, one that confronts communism, nihilism, narco states, and criminal cartels without apology, yet without adopting their cruelty. Justice need not imitate evil to defeat it. Criminal enterprises that traffic in misery cannot be permitted to stand, and innocent lives must be shielded. Our communities must be restored, and the rule of law must be reestablished where violence has replaced governance. Under God, indivisible, this vision affirms that righteousness, opportunity, and peace are not merely privileges reserved only for the few, but are goods worthy of protection wherever human dignity is threatened. The Western Hemisphere must steward its resources, its land, minerals, trade routes, and human capital, not for foreign powers or internal rot, but for the flourishing of mankind. What we seek is an order of liberty, a covenant, and a unified civilization. Not one that is a uniform culture, not one that is merely by paper only, but one that is rooted in faith, one that is governed by law, and one that is dedicated to the inviolable dignity of the human person. Destiny calls this hemisphere not to domination, but to responsibility. Unity forged by truth, justice, and moral courage. Only then can unity and diversity cease to compete and instead cooperate in human flourishing. And let me be clear, what I propose is no secret world order devised in shadows. We reject every system that imprisons the human spirit, that enslaves the will, or renders humanity obsolete. Any order that reduces people to data points, labor units, or variables to be managed rather than souls to be served. America has always stood for a nobler idea that every human being is endowed by God with dignity, purpose, and freedom, that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are not permissions granted by the state, but inherent rights bestowed by our Creator. From these truths arose a civilization shaped by rugged individual responsibility, ordered liberty, earned opportunity, and shared prosperity, principles that made a free future possible. As a city set upon a hill, America was never meant to dominate by force, but to illuminate by example. We shine as Christ shines, revealing truth, defending the vulnerable, restraining evil, and guarding liberty with moral courage rather than fear. When destructive ideologies arise, we confront them openly, transparently, and lawfully, not with secrecy or undermining or chaos, but with truth, joined together with strength. I say to you now, a united American empire, rightly understood, is not an instrument of tyranny, but a bulwark against it. It stands as a civilizational pillar that refuses to yield to forces that hollow the soul, erase meaning, and reduce man to material or mechanism. Through unity of purpose, we can shield our hemisphere from destructive agendas, secure our shores, stabilize our regions, and preserve the inheritance of freedom entrusted to us. And in doing so, we do not abandon the Constitution. We fulfill it. We embrace its charge to defend the land, protect our neighbors, and preserve liberty under God for ourselves and for generations yet unborn. Constitutional order is not weakened by responsibility, it is completed by it. The choice now rests with us. Shall we retreat into detachment and mere defense, watching division deepen while distant powers carve away our inheritance? Or shall we choose courage, covenant, and responsibility, allowing liberty to blaze outward across this hemisphere, not as domination, but as protection and renewal? Let us choose that path. Let us build an order that lifts the human spirit rather than diminishes it. Let us forge a union that hears every voice, honors every culture, and secures life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness from the Yukon to Patagonia. Not an abstraction, but as lived reality. This is our moment. This is our calling. Under God, let us pledge to make the Western Hemisphere a single family of free peoples, standing against darkness, guarding dignity, and shining as a beacon for mankind. The city upon a hill has become a continent, radiant with ordered liberty. Now let us begin the work. Let us answer history's call. And together, let us build this American empire that Providence has prepared. Not one of conquest, but for conscience. And not one for glory, but for stewardship. Thank you. God bless you all, and God bless this hemisphere we share.